The first time Emily Collins heard the footsteps behind her in the Appalachian forest, she convinced herself it was just the soft crackle of settling leaves, a harmless shift of forest weight that every hiker grew used to eventually. She had moved to the small mountain town of Carrick Hollow only 2 months earlier, searching for peace after a stressful year in the city. The Appalachians offered quiet mornings, ancient woods, and a sense of timelessness she craved. But the mountains also carried old stories, folk tales murmured by locals with lowered voices and darting eyes, stories Emily had politely smiled at but never taken seriously. That changed the day something started following her. She had chosen a narrow path twisting between towering pines, moss-covered stones, and fog that clung low like a hesitant ghost. The woods were cool, dim, almost holy, and she felt an odd thrill breathing the cold air deep into her lungs. She hiked often, sometimes alone, sometimes with her camera, sometimes just to hear her own thoughts. But that morning, halfway down an old unmarked trail near Briar Creek Ridge, she stopped, because something else stopped right after she did. At first it was faint, like a hesitant echo mimicking her movement. Step, crunch. Stop, silence. Step again, crunch behind her, just 3 beats later. Emily's pulse quickened. She turned sharply, expecting maybe a deer or a raccoon darting into the brush, but the woods behind her stayed still, quiet enough to hear the wind whisper through pine needles. She forced out a short laugh. "Probably just my imagination," she whispered. But the words dissolved in her throat. She continued forward, but the footsteps continued too. Not in sync with hers. Not random. Following. The next day, she returned because curiosity is a strange thing, stronger sometimes than fear. She carried a small knife, a flashlight, and her phone, though she knew the service dropped to 0 past the ridge. Emily walked the same trail, listening intently. The forest was alive with normal sounds, birds, insects, distant rustling, but no footsteps. Until she reached the clearing with the fallen oak. That's when she heard them again. Slow. Careful, measured, like someone was matching her pace intentionally. She spun around, scanning the underbrush, the dark cracks between the trees, the fog creeping like pale fingers across the ground. "Hello," she called out, hating the tremor in her voice. "Is someone there?" Silence pressed back. Heavy, cold. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak in her cabin felt like footsteps on the porch. Every groan in the wooden walls sounded like whispering in the dark. She sat up at 1:13 a.m., heart pounding for no clear reason, drawn toward the window by some instinct she couldn't name. She pulled back the curtain and froze. Something moved at the tree line. A tall silhouette. Still. Watching. She blinked hard, and it was gone. But the impression of it, too tall, shoulders angled strangely, head slightly tilted like a curious predator, burrowed deep into her nervous system. The next day at the general store, she approached an older man arranging tools behind the counter. His name tag read Harold. He had the kind of face carved by mountain life. Deep lines, wind-beaten skin, tired but sharp eyes. "You hike alone?" he asked after she purchased batteries and a new flashlight. She nodded. He paused, then lowered his voice. "Stay off Briar Creek Ridge." She stiffened. "Why?" Harold looked toward the windows like he expected someone or something to be listening. "People don't go up there no more. Not after what happened last winter." Emily waited, heart quickening. Harold shook his head. "You don't want those stories in your head. Just promise me you'll stick to marked trails." She thanked him, but his warning lingered like smoke around her thoughts. Emily tried. She stayed on marked trails for 3 days. Nothing followed her. No footsteps. No shadows. No signs of anything unnatural. Her fear faded slowly, replaced with creeping doubt. Maybe she had imagined it. Maybe stress played tricks on her senses. But doubt is dangerous in a curious mind, and curiosity eventually wins. So on the 4th morning, she went back to Briar Creek Ridge. The fog was heavier than usual, clinging low and curling around her ankles. She felt the air shift the moment she crossed the invisible boundary between the safer trails and the old, unmarked one. The woods seemed to exhale, long and slow, like they knew she was back. The footsteps began earlier this time. Softer. Closer. More confident, like whatever followed her had grown used to her presence. I know you're there, Emily said aloud, her breath shaky. Show yourself. The forest didn't oblige. The footsteps simply shifted behind a cluster of trees, pacing slowly, like a stalking animal. But no animal she knew walked upright. She took a slow, cautious step toward the trees. The footsteps retreated. She stepped back. They advanced. Her stomach tightened. Something intelligent was watching her, studying her, learning her. She raised her camera, snapped a photo toward the sound, though the fog swallowed everything beyond a few feet. Still, she kept walking deeper. The footsteps shadowed her every move. She reached the old fallen oak, the clearing where she had first heard it. The air was unnaturally cold. Her breath came out in pale clouds. Something moved in the fog, tall and slow. Emily stiffened and snapped another picture. The camera flash burst through the mist, and for a split second she saw it. A figure. Thin. Elongated. Limbs too long. Skin pale like wet paper. Its head jerked away from the sudden light. And its eyes, too hollow, deep-set pits, glowed faintly like embers suffocating in ash. Emily gasped and stumbled back, dropping her camera. By the time she scrambled to pick it up, the figure had vanished again into the thickening fog. She ran. The footsteps ran too, faster, heavier, no longer trying to hide. Branches whipped her arms. Her breath tore in ragged bursts. Something crashed through the underbrush behind her, closing the distance with terrifying speed. She burst into a clearing near the base of a shale ridge, her lungs burning. Then the footsteps stopped. Dead silent. Emily turned slowly, but the fog was impenetrable. The woods held their breath. Fear clawed at her, urging her home. The encounter left her shaken, derailed. She reviewed the photos that night, but all she found was blur, fog, and darkness. No figure, no monster, nothing to prove she wasn't losing her mind. Yet the memory of those hollow eyes haunted her every thought. 3 nights later, she heard footsteps outside her cabin. Slow, dragging, deliberate. She crept to the window, dread squeezing her chest like a vice. At first she saw nothing. Then she realized the footsteps were circling the house. Something brushed against the siding. Scritch, scritch, like long fingers trailing along wood. She backed away from the window, breath shaking, and grabbed her phone. No signal. She locked her doors, turned off all lights, and slid onto the floor, pressing her back against the wall. The circling continued for nearly an hour, then stopped abruptly. A long silence swallowed the room. Emily waited in the dark until morning, too afraid to move. She tried to leave town the next day, packing hurriedly, heart pounding with every sound outside. But her car wouldn't start. Nothing happened, not even a click. She walked to the general store for help, finding Harold behind the counter, as usual. When she described what happened, he paled. Truly paled. "Did you look at it?" he asked in a voice so low she barely heard him. Emily blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Harold leaned closer. "Did you meet its eyes?" She inhaled sharply, remembering that split-second flash in the fog. Just for a moment. Harold swore under his breath, then motioned for her to follow him to the back room. He locked the door. "What you saw ain't supposed to be seen," he whispered. "Mountain folk call it the follower. Some say it's older than the forest itself. It watches anyone who wanders too far off path. But if it looks back when you see it, if it notices you noticed, then it won't stop." Emily felt her throat tighten. "Stop what?" Harold stared at her with hollow fear. "Following." She felt the room tilt. "You mean it's after me?" Harold nodded grimly. "If it's marked you, the woods ain't safe. Your home ain't safe. Nowhere's safe. It comes for those who see it." Emily swallowed hard. How do I stop it?" Harold shook his head. "You don't." But Emily refused to accept that. She returned to her cabin, adrenaline pulse tight. She wasn't running anymore. If something was hunting her, she needed to confront it, or at least understand why. She gathered a backpack, flashlight, camera, and a flare gun she found in the old shed. She waited until dusk, then headed back toward Briar Creek Ridge. The deeper she walked, the colder the forest became. The air felt heavier, almost thick. Fog crawled between the trees like living smoke. And then the footsteps began again. Soft at first. Then louder. Closer. Emily didn't run this time. She walked steadily, breath sharp, waiting for the right moment. When the footsteps came within a few yards, she spun and fired the flare into the fog. The red burst lit the forest in an eerie glow, and she finally saw the follower clearly. Its body was impossibly tall, bones jutting beneath stretched, colorless skin. Its arms hung nearly to the forest floor, fingers long and sharp like broken twigs. Its head was tilted, its face expressionless except for those hollow ember-like eyes locked onto her with predatory curiosity. It stepped forward, impossibly silent for something its size. Emily raised the flare gun again, but the creature moved so suddenly, so impossibly fast, that she stumbled backward over a root and crashed hard onto the ground. Her flashlight rolled away, flickering weakly. The follower towered above her now, leaning down in a grotesque arc, its head cocking as though studying her fear. Emily screamed, and shot the flare directly into its chest. The forest ignited in red light. The creature reeled back, not with pain, but with an almost confused reaction, like it had never been touched before. It staggered, then melted backward into the fog, vanishing without a sound. Emily didn't wait. She ran. She sprinted through the forest, heart tearing at her ribs, until she saw the glow of her cabin lights through the trees. She burst through her front door, slammed it shut, locked it, pushed furniture against it, and collapsed on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. For a moment, silence. Then, thud. On the porch. Another thud. Then slow, dragging steps circling the cabin. It was back. It had followed her home. The footsteps scraped against the wall. The doorknob rattled. The windows trembled as something tall leaned its weight against them. Emily grabbed her camera, not to save herself, but because some instinct demanded she document it, prove it, leave something behind. She raised the camera and snapped a photo through the window just as a pale, elongated hand pressed against the glass. Crack. The glass splintered. Emily screamed and stumbled back. Crack. The second impact sent a spiderweb of fractures across the window. Crack. The final blow shattered it. A long arm reached inside. Emily backed into the hallway, her breath ragged. Stop. Please stop, she sobbed, but the creature simply crawled inside, limbs contorting unnaturally, folding and unfolding with insect-like precision. Emily grabbed her flare gun, but it was empty. The follower straightened slowly, towering over her, its hollow eyes glowing faintly as it leaned low enough to brush its face near hers. And then, it vanished. Gone in a blink, as though it had dissolved into the shadows. Emily collapsed to the floor, trembling violently, unsure if she was still alive only because it allowed her to be. The next morning, she found footprints outside, massive, deep, inhuman prints circling her cabin again and again. She packed her belongings and left Carrick Hollow without looking back. But on her drive out, something followed her car. In the rearview mirror, she saw it walking along the tree line, matching her speed, watching, still following. She has moved 5 times since then. The footsteps follow her everywhere. She hears them outside every new home, always after dark, always slower when she listens, always closer when she prays they aren't real. And sometimes, when she's brave enough to look out the window, she sees glowing ember eyes staring back. The follower never stops. Because Emily looked at it. And once it knows you've seen it, it never lets you go.